Think about the greatest intellectual centers of the ancient world. You probably picture Athens for philosophy, right? Or Rome for sheer imperial power. But there is a huge, vital piece of the puzzle that almost always gets overlooked. Ancient Beirut, known back then as Berytus, was actually Rome's mother of laws. It was the intellectual engine that literally built the legal foundations of the world we live in today. Welcome to this explainer.
In fact, let's put it this way. Before the modern world had Harvard for law, the Roman Empire had Beirut. It's a pretty staggering thought, isn't it? We're talking about a bustling, ancient Phoenician city that rose up to become the undisputed center of legal scholarship for the most powerful empire on earth. If you wanted to practice law or shape policy at the absolute highest levels of the Roman world, all roads actually didn't lead to Rome. They led to Berytus.
It even had an official title, Berytus Nutrix Legum, which translates directly to Beirut, Mother of Laws. And look, this wasn't just some flattering nickname cooked up by the locals. It was a universally recognized title of immense prestige. To really understand its influence and academic rigor, you have to think of it like the Oxford or Bologna of the ancient world. It wasn't just another dot on the map of the empire, it was the ultimate legal capital.
So, how exactly did a Mediterranean port city become Rome's premier law school?
Well, by late antiquity, Beirut's absolute supremacy in legal education was undeniable. It was so highly regarded that it was officially sanctioned by imperial decree as one of only 3 authorized law schools in the entire Roman Empire. Think about that exclusivity. It stood shoulder to shoulder with Rome and Constantinople themselves. And honestly, in many ways regarding pure legal scholarship, Beirut outshone them both. It was the place to be if you had one of the sharpest minds of the era.
The rise of this institution is fascinating to track. The school was up and running no later than the 3rd century AD, and its reputation just exploded from there. Fast forward to 426 AD, and the law of citations officially cemented the authority of Beirut's greatest alumni. But the absolute pinnacle? That happened in 533 AD. That's when Emperor Justinian I issued his landmark constitution Omnem, formally and officially crowning Beirut as the nursing mother of the laws.
But getting that kind of imperial recognition meant delivering an incredibly elite legal education.
What did it actually take to earn your stripes at the Mother of Laws? Well, students traveled from all across the Mediterranean world, packing up their lives just to attend. And once they got there, they faced a grueling 5-year curriculum. We're talking a deep dive, starting with Roman civil and private law, then pushing into legal interpretation and jurisprudence, mastering court procedure and advocacy, and finally tackling complex imperial constitutions and administrative law. This brutal, brilliant model literally set the standard for how law would be taught for centuries to come.
And if you made it through, graduating from Beirut wasn't just a nice academic milestone to hang on your wall. Because the study was so intense, alumni were perfectly positioned for the most powerful roles the empire had to offer. The school was, quite literally, a fast-track gateway to imperial power. It churned out the judges, the provincial governors, the top-tier advocates, and the senior officials who went on to administer justice across the vast Roman world.
Naturally, a school like this was a magnet for absolute geniuses, what we might call the Phoenician legal giants. Many of these superstar jurists were actually local Phoenician natives. Let's look at 2 heavyweights. First, you have Papinian, born in Phoenicia around 140 AD. This guy wrote an incredibly precise Latin, and his legal reasoning was so bulletproof that the law of citations made his works legally binding in court proceedings. Literally, his word was law. Then you have Ulpian, a native of the nearby city of Tyre. While Papinian was all about precise authority, Ulpian was incredibly prolific. He had this clear, elegant writing style that just made complex law accessible. Together, their brilliant minds fundamentally shaped Roman jurisprudence. And their legacy paved the way for something truly monumental, Justinian's legal revolution. To really grasp the sheer scale of their impact, you just have to look at Emperor Justinian's definitive compilation of Roman law, the Digest, or Pandex. This is the cornerstone text of civil law, and well over 1/3 of it, 35% of that entire empire-defining text, was supplied by just those 2 Phoenician jurists, Ulpian and Papinian. Ulpian's writings alone account for a full third of the whole thing. When the emperor needed to organize the laws of the known world, he relied heavily on the genius forged in Phoenicia.
And he didn't just rely on the archives, he brought in the living legends of Beirut, too. Take Dorotheus, a widely renowned law professor teaching right there in Beirut. He was specifically tapped to co-author the Institutes, which became the official Roman legal textbook used to introduce all new students to the law. Modern legal historians pretty much universally agree on this. Without Beirut, and without the scholars trained in its halls, Justinian's entire legal revolution simply wouldn't have happened.
So you might be wondering, why here? What were the Phoenician roots of law and governance that made this possible?
This massive explosion of legal genius happening specifically in Beirut was definitely no accident. You see, Roman law didn't just arrive on a blank slate, it merged with deeply ingrained Phoenician traditions. Long before the Romans even showed up, Phoenician city-states like Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos were running highly structured political systems. They already relied on councils of elders, elected magistrates, and very well codified legal norms to handle complex commerce, property rights, and civic duties.
When you mix that ancient Phoenician tradition of structured commercial civic life with high-level Roman legal philosophy, boom, you get an intellectual environment absolutely perfectly primed for legal scholarship. Plus, Beirut was this thriving cosmopolitan hub. Its intellectual capital went way beyond just law. It was a buzzing center where philosophy, theology, and rhetoric flourished, supported by thriving Syriac Christian schools in the region. It was literally the crossroads where Greek, Roman, and Eastern traditions all collided and converged.
But, as with all great ancient cities, we have to talk about its enduring legal legacy and its tragic end.
Because every golden age eventually meets its end. In the year 551 AD, an absolutely catastrophic earthquake struck the Mediterranean coast. It leveled a huge portion of Beirut, completely and totally destroying the legendary law school. Now, a few surviving professors did manage to relocate to nearby Sidon, but the institution itself, it never fully recovered from the physical devastation. The physical mother of laws was suddenly gone.
Yet the ashes of Beirut essentially seeded the future of global justice. The texts, the teachings, the core principles shaped in Beirut, they survived. They lived on through Byzantine and Islamic administrations. Centuries later, medieval European universities began reviving Roman legal science, and they based it directly on the precise texts that Beirut's masters had refined. The ripples of that survival are literally all around us today. Modern civil law systems across Europe, Latin America, and beyond still rest firmly on the foundations built by Beirut's jurists.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. Beirut was not simply some provincial outpost school of Rome. It was the legal mind of the empire. It was the intellectual protagonist of Roman legal history, a city that took the raw, messy materials of imperial decrees and meticulously forged them into a sophisticated, enduring science of justice.
Which leaves us with this final remarkable thought. When we look at the legal codes that govern property, commerce, and civil rights in so much of the world today, we naturally default to crediting Rome. But knowing that the definitive compilation of modern civil law was so heavily written, refined, and taught in ancient Lebanon, you have to ask, how much of our everyday justice is actually a Phoenician legacy? It completely changes how you view history, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history we think we know.